Welcome, friend. Follow me. We're going somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous. Most people would never dare enter the place we are going. There's no telling what horrors we'll find, what terrors we'll uncover. Don't say I didn't warn you. We might discover terrible monsters lurking there. Be careful, they could follow you out. Or maybe they're already inside you. Are you afraid? Good. Now you are ready to enter the Warning Woods. Crystal opened the front door and slipped out of her house into the cool evening with her phone buzzing in her hand. As she inserted the key to lock the door with one hand, she answered the phone with the other. Brian? Thanks for calling me back. Brian Sinclair, her fellow operative during the Nebraska Barrens hatchery mission, was the first to return one of her calls for help.
Sure, Crystal, but...
How dare you try to bring him back in? He has a family.
A woman's voice in the background interrupted him. Crystal assumed it belonged to Brian's wife.
Julia, please.
Brian said with his head turned away from the phone.
Just let me handle this. Don't even think about it.
Julia warned. Then, apparently, she left.
Sorry about that.
Brian apologized. Crystal said, No, I'm sorry. You got out for good reason, and if I were her, I'd be scared too.
I'm not sure I'd say she's scared,
Brian said. Crystal could picture him looking over his shoulder by the way his voice faded momentarily. When he turned back around, he whispered,
She's pissed.
Newsflash, Crystal replied. She's pissed because she's scared. Nobody likes to feel that way. Anyway, I need to talk to you, probably not over the phone. Is there a way we could...
I'm not meeting you, Crystal,
Brian said, sounding more serious. Then, as if having second thoughts, he asked,
Where'd you end up anyway?
I went home, Crystal answered. After a long pause to think, Brian asked,
Indiana?
Yep. And, hey, do you remember what happened here? Asked Crystal.
Sure, I heard about it.
I think something's happening here again.
Brian, wrap it up.
Julia Sinclair shouted in the background.
Hold on, honey, just hold on.
Brian nearly growled. Then, into the phone, he said,
Look, I got out. Julia's actually right. I shouldn't be talking to you about this stuff. Honestly, I only called you back because I've been worried about what happened to you after we went our separate ways.
I'm flattered, but I really need to know. Commander Graham said something about the Proudie fissure being...
Hey,
Brian whispered harshly.
Not over the phone.
Sorry. He mentioned that the you-know-what here in my hometown was closed after the incident. He told me that when he called to offer me the job.
Look,
Brian said.
You'll probably find this hard to believe given your history with the man, but Graham knew what he was doing. He lost it there at the end, but if he told you they closed it, my money would say they did. If something's happening again, something bigger might be happening.
Great, Crystal grunted. It sounded like Brian might be about to say something, but she spoke over him. How do you do it? How do you close them? I never learned.
Oh, well...
Brian sounded hesitant, which made Crystal nervous.
It's not an exact science. It's not a science at all, really. I'll be honest, when we did it in Nebraska, it was relatively easy. There was a rocky hole in the ground we just filled in with boulders. I'm sure the, door is still technically there, but we blocked anything from physically passing through. That's not always an option, though. Some of them just seem to tear through time and space. From what I've heard, the one Graham, showed you was like that.
What do you do when that's the case? Crystal asked.
I'm not sure, but... Look, I wish I could help you, but I made a promise to my family that I'd be done with this stuff. They don't...
She sensed him looking over his shoulder again.
They really don't even know what I used to do. They thought it was just military stuff, you know? I called it Black Ops. But that's not the point, though. I told them I'm done, and I am. I'm done.
Just tell me one thing, Crystal pled. If, just hypothetically, the door here was closed back in 2020, how could it be open again now? Brian said,
Like I said, this isn't exactly science. It's closer to religion. Different people, different groups, they have different explanations. These things, my understanding is they open up most of the time due to a massive trauma in or to the area. Tragedy can scar a place, basically, and the doors are those scars. That's about all I know. I'm sorry, Crystal. I really should go.
Brian, please.
Put together a team of people you can trust. That's the best and only advice I'll give. Don't do this alone. You're gonna need other people to help ground you if you take this on.
I hoped you'd be one of them, Crystal replied. Brian said,
Goodbye, Agent Jennings.
And hung up. Rose helped Crystal arrange a meeting with Chief Labrie set early the next day. Crystal wanted his take on the bizarre creatures spotted in and around Proudie. Jennings, come on in, Mike Labrie boomed from behind his desk that was once briefly her own. Crystal nodded once in the doorway, then stepped inside. Without asking either of them, Rose shut the door. This caused Labrie to raise an eyebrow. He said, Rose was a bit cagey about the purpose of this meeting. Everything okay? I was hoping you could tell me, Crystal replied. She mentioned there have been some some animals that don't seem quite like animals, if you know what I mean. We went to the woods and... Labrie cut her off. How long have you been back, Jennings? About 2 days. Uh-huh. Labrie leaned back in his chair, studying her. He sucked on his tongue a few seconds before saying, through a forced smile, This place has, overall, been pretty peaceful since you left. You know that? Sure, there are some kooks who still call in mutant sightings from time to time, but what do you expect after all those rumors spread after Cross Tower, huh? Jennings, Crystal, what I need you to understand is if you're thinking of staying, the monster crap stops right here, right now. This town needs a revival, not a relapse. Wonder how many times he's used that line, Crystal thought. She fired back, I'm not sure you're being given a choice, Chief. Besides, I was at Cross Tower. I saw the owl. I fought it. I killed it. Where were you, huh? Even Chief Bradley showed up. Where the hell were you? Labrie leaned forward and growled, Just what are you trying to imply? It was my night off and there was a curfew, remember? It was my night off too, Jennings replied. Well, maybe you should have stayed home and enjoyed it then. Ever think of that? If they couldn't abort this conversation soon, Crystal worried she might throw Labrie's nameplate at his head. Her rage felt like a balloon in the base of her throat. How Labrie could justify sitting around and doing nothing while people he swore to protect were shredded to pieces astounded her. When she read he'd been appointed chief, she'd hoped he had changed, but now wondered if that would ever be possible. She asked, How much do you know about where I went after I left? That's another thing, Labrie said. It irks me that you ran off and now you want to come back and dig up, Crystal snapped. First of all, I didn't run off. I found a way to learn more about what happened here and I followed it. Second, I know things that would turn your entire backwards world on its head, okay? Everything you think you know, it's wrong, and I've seen the proof. And lastly, there is something happening out in Proudie, even if you don't believe the reports. I've seen it myself in the woods. There is something extremely dangerous out there right now, Mike, and it's not going away on its own. Enlighten me, Labrie challenged. Okay, Jennings said, trying on a less oppositional tone. Despite her anger, it was critical that Chief Labrie hear and understand what she was about to explain. Without getting into all the details of where I went when I left, I worked on exactly the type of anomaly that is affecting Proudie. I was recruited by a federal agency because of how she thumbed toward Rose on the other side of the door, handled the owl. The owl got here through something called a fissure, which is basically a tear in the fabric of reality. And before you try to laugh me out of here, I've seen them, Mike. I've seen what comes out of them too. And I don't just mean the owl. There's no end to the types of weird creatures and beings and entities, I guess, that leak out of fissures. We've given them names like ghosts, monsters, and even demons. The mention of demons seemed to finally hook Labrie's attention. All that scary stuff you were told wasn't real as a kid, it's all real. It all comes from these fissures, and there's one open in the Proudie woods right now. Well, Labrie replied after a moment's consideration. Before the whole owl thing, I'll admit you weren't someone I'd have called delusional. So let's say I choose to believe this insanity for one day and one day only. Is this demonic fissure something you can actually show me, or is this the kind of thing I need to smoke a few trees to see? You can see it, Jennings replied calmly. She considered correcting Labrie's use of the term demonic, but decided if his religious beliefs were what convinced him to take her seriously, she didn't mind. Well, look, I have a few odds and ends to take care of around here, but what if I meet you around, say... He straightened and called out, "Hey, Rose." The door opened. "Yes," Rose replied. "Anything on my calendar at 3? "Need me to show you how to check?" Rose replied sweetly enough that Labrie couldn't confidently call her out for being condescending. When he looked down at the computer monitor to his side, Rose winked at Crystal, though. After a couple of clicks, Labrie said without turning back, "Yup, 3 it is. Meet me at the trailhead out by you. Most of the entrances have been let go. Nobody really goes in those woods anymore. So, 3 o'clock, South Trailhead." "Copy that," Crystal replied. A dart of emotion pierced her chest when she saw a brief glimpse of nostalgia pass across Labrie's features. He nodded curtly and said, "Over." Crystal biked home after the meeting despite Rose's offer to drive her. She bypassed her old route through the Proudie woods, choosing the risks posed by speeding cars and trucks on the highway over the risks posed by the fissure. Besides, Labrie made it sound like all the trails had fallen into disrepair. Back at home, she put her old bike in the garage and found herself staring at the Grand Caravan sitting there on its flat tires just rusting away. She thought, if I'm going to be pursuing the dangers to this town, I'm going to need something to drive. She moved 2 tangled wire rakes off of an air compressor coated in sawdust, then plugged it in. Automatically, the garage reverberated with the compressor's familiar rumbling hum. At each tire, Crystal sent up an aimless prayer that it would inflate, and whether or not the prayers had anything to do with it, they all filled and held pressure. Crystal accepted this good omen and lifted the hood. She unclipped the flashlight she'd started carrying again off her belt and shone it into the engine compartment. Something moved. She held the light steady and watched. When something made a scratching noise inside the engine, Crystal took a sliding step backward. She directed the flashlight's beam to the place where the sound came from and saw the flick of a small, black tentacle before it vanished in the shadows. It wasn't a tentacle, it was a tail, she told herself. It's just a mouse, probably built a nest in there. She decided to take a look when she crawled underneath to drain the oil. She would have to go to South Bend to get new oil and a filter, and while she was there, she figured she would also pick up new spark plugs for good measure, as well as fogging oil to lubricate the cylinders and hopefully avoid any damage to the slumbering engine when she started the van for the first time. And, she thought, she should probably drain the old gasoline out of the tank and replace that as well. After that, as long as the mice or whatever else might be living in the engine hadn't chewed through anything, she should have a working vehicle. Before jacking up the front end of the van to get to the oil plug, she opened the Uber app and put in a request for a trip to AutoZone. While she raised the front end on the driver's side, her phone buzzed to notify her that her driver, Drew, was on his way to pick her up. She wondered if he might be able to tell her anything new about what was happening around town. Rose, though reliable, still worked for the police department, which probably meant there were things the ordinary folks around town talked about that didn't quite make it to her, things they didn't want getting to Chief Labrie. She put a jack stand under the driver's side, But after she raised the passenger side, she decided just to lock the car jack under it rather than waste time placing a jack stand. She needed to rush if she was going to get the van in shape before she needed to meet Labrie. With both front wheels raised, she kicked an oil pan under the van, laid down her dad's oil-stained wooden creeper, then rolled herself under the engine. She'd changed the oil on this van so many times with her dad, she knew exactly where to find the plug. Before she had to worry about gushing oil getting all over her, she took out her flashlight and shone it up into the engine, searching for the mouse or its nest. Not seeing either, she wondered if it quietly scampered away while she'd been jacking up the car. All the noise would have scared it. She did see a small piece of straw sticking out near the radiator and twisted her arm around the engine to reach up and pull it out. Her fingertips could just barely brush the straw. She tried to pinch it, hoping if it was connected to a nest she could pull the whole thing down. Her fingertips got a hold of it and pulled. Sure enough, a small nest trailed behind it, but it caught on something out of sight, so, trying not to rip it apart, Crystal paused. From the same out-of-sight place, something shiny and black struck, impacting the side of her thumb before her brain registered it. With a shout, Jennings retracted her hand. She dropped the flashlight in her other hand to grab the van's frame and pull herself out from under it, but before she moved, the thing that struck her slipped down, landing directly on her stomach with a dry thud. On instinct, she grabbed it with her throbbing hand and tossed it away. It slid across the floor, then coiled near the workbench. A thick, black snake. Crystal pulled herself out on the creeper and rolled off of it. Before she stood, she reached under the car for her flashlight, which she brandished as she faced the poised snake head on. Sparing a quick glance at her hand, she saw she was bleeding from 2 even punctures at the base of her thumb. She then studied the snake, identifying it as a black king snake, and hoped she was right because they weren't venomous. She supposed she would find out soon enough. The snake struck out at her, managing to launch itself 3 feet through the air with its jaw stretched. Its teeth flew at her like darts at the 4 corners of its gaping mouth, and in the center, where the black hole of its throat should have been, she saw a transparent eye with a vertical, slitted pupil staring directly at her. Shouting, she batted the creature away. It clacked against the van, then launched again within a second of touching the ground. It fired off like a spring, aiming once more for Crystal. This time, when she briefly glanced into its mouth, she saw a red substance swimming inside the transparent eye. It looked like blood. Her blood, she thought, from the bite. She dodged the snake, letting it pass her and land next to the workbench again. Too quickly for her eyes to track, it spiraled up one leg of the bench, then launched itself at her again, shooting like a missile. She tried to dodge, but this time the snake's tail wrapped around her right elbow. It whipped itself over her shoulders, brushing against the back of her neck. She knew snakes were agile, but not like this. She dropped her flashlight and wrapped both hands around the snake near its head. Not quite near enough, though. The snake managed to snap twice at her hands, piercing both of them with its hooked teeth. Crystal cried out and let go, shrugging the snake off. It coiled when it landed next to the raised passenger side tire. Its head rose and its jaws parted as it didn't hiss. It made a phlegmy sound, and Crystal watched in horror as more of her blood flooded into the reddening eye in its throat. The fresh blood entered from both sides in disintegrating spirals. Crystal lashed out with a kick, connecting with the snake's practically weightless head. The snake sprang under her car. It didn't slither. This snake, which Crystal already knew was no ordinary snake, sprang and leapt when it moved. This made its movements far less predictable than a regular snake, which, although can strike quickly and often without warning, always moves in the direction its head is pointed. After the snake vanished beneath the van, Crystal lost track of it. She bent over far enough to see through to the other side, but still couldn't locate it. She quickly straightened, backing toward the center of the garage where nothing could jump out at her from closer than 3 feet away. She listened, hearing nothing. She thought about opening the garage door to see if it would leave on its own, but decided she couldn't. She could not unleash the blood-guzzling creature on the people and animals outside. She had to kill it. Risking a couple of steps toward the van, she peered into the engine compartment to see if the snake had returned to its hideout. She knew it could camouflage amongst the gray and black engine parts and their shadows, but then again it was probably small and agile enough it didn't need to use camouflage. It could have tucked itself away in just about any nook or cranny in the garage. Crystal's hands were bleeding. Blood dripped from both of her thumbs, and on the hand that got bit twice, blood covered most of her fingers. Staring at all the blood wasting out of her gave her an idea, though. Reaching behind her, she grabbed the cleanest hand towel she could find on the workbench. She first held the towel under her double-punctured hand, catching the dripping blood before pressing the hand towel down on the wounds and wiping that hand clean. Then she took the bloodied cloth and did the same with her other hand. Now she had a rag not quite saturated but certainly covered with blood. Still moving warily, she bent over and pushed the bloodied hand towel under the raised passenger tire, then waited. As she hoped, the snake sprang out of the engine again, but this time it didn't aim for her. It only wanted her blood, which she'd made readily available on the floor. As soon as the snake thing's teeth sank into the bloody towel, Crystal twisted the handle of the locked jack, releasing it and causing it to drop that side of the van. Due to the screeching protests from the van's frame, Crystal was not rewarded with the sound of the snake's skull and that terrible eye being crushed under the wheel. But when everything settled, she could hear its tail rhythmically smacking against the floor. Perhaps its muscles were spasming, or perhaps it wasn't dead yet. But either way, she knew she'd trapped it. "Gotcha," she muttered, letting the jack handle clatter to the floor. Next, from the workbench, she grabbed a pair of bolt cutters. She had to stick one leg under the van to hold the slapping tail still while she worked the blades around the snake's middle, but once she had them in place, they cut through the creature with ease. The tail stopped moving. No blood spilled from the creature. Its innards looked like rubber, almost like it was nothing more than a toy. Crystal couldn't help but wonder if there would be anything left of that strange eye for her to study if she raised the van. She used the jack, still in place, to lift the wheel off the snake's head. It stuck to the tire, at first lifting the towel with it, only dropping to the floor when she raised the tire about 10 inches off the ground. She grabbed 2 pairs of pliers and knelt beside the crushed snake, using them to pry its mashed jaws apart. They felt sticky, but dry. Something in the snake's throat moved. Crystal froze, still holding its jaws apart, anxious but no longer afraid to see what might emerge. She felt a hint of her old curiosity, a touch of intrigue. But what came out still horrified her. It was a much tinier version of the snake she had killed. That eye, she realized, hadn't been an eye after all, and the pupil in the middle hadn't been a pupil. It was an embryo, and now it had hatched. She wondered if, in the seconds it writhed under the tire, certainly going to die, if the parent snake had drained its own blood to finish feeding its progeny. With another twist of the jack handle, Crystal crushed the baby snake too. For good measure, after she lowered the other wheel, she turned the steering wheel back and forth to grind the creatures into the floor, ensuring any further generations inside them never came to term. At the very same moment she released the steering wheel, her phone chimed with an alert that Drew Harrison was outside to pick her up. She hurried over to the deep sink next to the workbench and rinsed the blood off of her hands. It kept coming, but it had begun to slow. Thankfully, her father's first aid kit was still in the van's glove box, and while most of the adhesive bandages and alcohol wipes had doubtlessly dried up, she only needed a few gauze pads. She taped them to her hands with masking tape before going to the garage door opener. Drew's silver Nissan Versa's headlights greeted her when the door went up. "Drew?" Crystal asked as she opened the back door of the car. That's me, Drew replied with zero enthusiasm. We going to South Bend today? Yes, we are, Crystal replied, sliding into the back seat. She felt oddly buoyant after her victory over the vampire snake. Maybe this whole time all she'd needed was a win. She still didn't feel fully herself, but better than she had after her meeting with Labrie. Much better. Drew backed down the driveway and pointed them toward the highway. AutoZone, huh? You working on anything interesting? She saw his eyes in the rearview mirror drop down to her bandaged hands. What would be interesting? Crystal asked, teasing out conversation that wouldn't directly involve her injuries. Oh, I don't know. You restoring a classic or something? Asked Drew. Crystal grinned. It's my dad's 94 Grand Caravan, does that count? Clearly trying to be nice, Drew said, Oh, well, that's kinda cool. It doesn't have to be like a muscle car or anything to be a classic, right? Drew, it looks like a shoebox, Crystal replied. He responded with a short laugh. Yeah, I can picture it. Hey, do you remember me at all? Crystal had been eyeing the side of his face ever since getting in his car, trying to determine whether he was the kid she remembered on Halloween night 2020 dressed as the Tiger King. She thought so, but that would make him only 16 or 17 years old. She wasn't exactly sure how old you needed to be to drive for Uber, but she had a feeling it was older than that. She asked anyway, though. Tiger King? Huh? You were dressed up as Tiger King on the night of Cross Tower. Drew looked confused, then smacked the steering wheel and snapped his fingers. My little brother Peter and his friends did a whole group costume from that show that year. Man, they were pissed when trick-or-treating got canceled. I know, I stopped them, Crystal said, laughing. So, I'm trying to remember. What would I remember you from? Cards on the table, Rose Barnum mentioned your name and told me about... Drew interrupted. Yeah, I had a couple bad years after Cross Tower. I was at the church that night. That's where I thought you might remember me from. Not to brag or anything, but I'm the kid who smashed the church doors open with a chair, and I helped catch Rose when she fell too. Well, nice work, said Crystal. Then she added, Cross Tower kind of messed me up for a while too. Yeah, I'm surprised you're back. Where'd you go anyway? Drew asked. Crystal looked out her window and passively stated, Oh, a secret paramilitary government agency recruited me to help fight monsters from another dimension. Drew chuckled. Nice. Then he added, Is that what you need the old van for? Is it like that show my dad used to watch, The A-Team? It was Crystal's turn to laugh. Yes, actually, that is what it's for. The feds cut my department's budget. After ingratiating her with another laugh, Drew asked, So where did you really go? Are you still a cop? Not anymore. Drew grunted through his nose. Good, 'cause no offense, but I can't stand cops anymore. Looking out her window again, Crystal replied, Living in this town, I can't blame you. A few minutes of semi-awkward silence passed. Crystal let them remain empty because she sensed Drew was wrestling with something he wanted to say. He finally said, You're gonna think I'm dumb for asking this, but was that true, what you said? Which part? Crystal asked. Of course, it was all true, but that was her secret. The thing about the monsters, Drew replied. Can I ask why you're asking? Drew said, Well, you were at Cross Tower, so I guess it's safe to assume you're a believer, right? One of the first and probably the strongest, Crystal replied. She could feel it. She was close. She hadn't wanted to ask Drew point blank whether he'd noticed anything strange around town. She knew direct questions about that sort of thing could cause certain people to exaggerate or fabricate, and such editorializations could easily misdirect an investigation. However, if a subject brought up their experience organically and of their own accord, they were much less likely to exaggerate since it could make their story less believable. Based on Drew's demeanor, he already felt worried she'd think him crazy. So what if I told you, he began, that there's been other stuff coming out of the woods since that night? I'd ask to hear more, Crystal replied. Drew nodded slowly. The other stuff, I think it's coming through some sort of portal in the woods, and I think I found it. Crystal bit her tongue. Drew said, It's not even that far in. There's like something in the air. I think it scares most people away before they see it because it's got this weird, frequency that kind of makes you want to puke. They've stopped even keeping the trails clear. They're all overgrown and stuff, or at least they were this summer. Now the plants are dying off, so it's getting a little clearer, and I think that's why more stuff is coming out of the woods. So, how did you find this supposed portal? Crystal asked. Drew put on his turn signal and started drifting toward an off-ramp. I wanted to know what was out there, so I ignored the bad feeling and walked off the trail toward the weird frequency. I found this spot where the air, shimmered. The sick feeling turned into straight-up anxiety really bad in that area, and I just couldn't go any further. I thought it was weird, but it's not like I can go to the cops or anything. They'd never believe me because of that time after Cross Tower, you know. Not sure if you want to hear this from your Uber driver, but I actually got a DUI when I was 17. I know, Brew Harrison, Crystal replied. Drew looked back at her with an expression of shock. There happened to be a red light at the end of the ramp. And you still requested a ride from me? He asked. Crystal shrugged. Rose said it was expunged, so... She poofed her fingers next to her head. Before he could reply, she said, So you think you found the portal, but are you just guessing that stuff is coming out of it? Drew said, I have cameras. Trail cams I set up near the portal and they capture things. I set them up in case they catch anything like that owl thing. I figured I could warn everybody like that journalist guy tried to. Andy, Crystal cut in, not wanting her late friend and unsung hero Andy Laxton to remain only that journalist guy in the memories of those he helped save. Yeah, that guy, said Drew. After a few times catching weird animals appearing on the cameras out of nowhere, I started uploading clips to YouTube to see if anybody could help me figure out what was happening. You have video and you still won't go to the police? Crystal asked, slightly frustrated but not showing it. I am now, Drew replied, glancing back at her. Crystal started to say, but I'm not. She cut herself short, though. She understood what he meant, and it made her feel a sense of pride she decided just to sit back and appreciate. Finally, the light turned green, and they turned left into South Bend. Crystal was already late to meet Labrie by the time she poured in the new oil and gas, replaced the van's battery, a last-minute thought she had at AutoZone, and lubricated the engine's cylinders, replacing the spark plugs as she did so. Fortunately, the van started after 2 stressful clicks from the starter. The engine sounded too loud to Crystal's ears, but eventually settled into its unexpectedly familiar rumble. She hoped it would keep running at least until she got to the woods. The remains of the vampire snake she threw in the trash can just to hide them away. Labrie looked impatient when she pulled up to the trailhead 7 minutes later. The clock read 3:41. Crystal apologized with a limp wave and a crooked nod of her head, but nothing more. How far do we have to go in there? Labrie asked, looking a bit ill as he stared down the trail. Crystal did not believe this was due, at least in full part, to his glaring lack of athleticism. You afraid, Chief? She asked. Oh, of course not, Labrie scoffed unconvincingly. That's too bad, Crystal replied, smirking. Defeating the snake and fixing the van, plus her validating conversation with Drew Harrison, all had her feeling closer to her old self than she had in years. She told Labrie, You should at least be a little afraid before you enter these woods. There's no telling what we might find in there. Labrie replied, I thought you were going to show me a portal or something. What I'm worried about, Crystal said, is what might come out of it. Now Labrie looked truly nervous. Good, Crystal said, taking this in. Now you're ready. Just take me to the damn thing, was all Labrie had to say. They progressed down the trail slowly, although Crystal did feel much safer in the higher light of the mid-afternoon. She didn't think something could surprise her as easily as it could have the other evening with Rose. They came to the enormous wasp nest, and Crystal halted Labrie. She motioned for him to listen. Both of them stood still for at least 1 full minute. Nothing. The nest was silent. "They might be nocturnal," Crystal whispered. "Last time I was here, they just started creeping out. That was at sunset." "What are they?" Labrie asked. His voice quavered. "I'm not actually sure," Jennings replied. "I assume some type of insectoid, but I didn't get a good enough look." "Insectoid? I'd rather not know," Labrie replied, coating his fear with humor. "Me either," said Crystal. She led him further along. About where Crystal had first heard a glimpse of the fissure's hum last time, Labrie stumbled. She jogged back to him to make sure he wasn't having a heart attack. I'm fine, he hacked. He spat to the side of the trail. "I'm just feeling a bit dizzy for some reason." "We change elevation much?" he asked, looking back the way they'd come. "Not much," Crystal replied. She recalled Drew Harrison talking about the sickly feeling being a repellent and wondered if she was witnessing this effect now. She felt a slight churning in the back of her brain, somewhere between a dizzy spell and a fever, but it obviously wasn't as debilitating as whatever Labrie was feeling. Why was that? Perhaps falling through one of the fissures had vaccinated her against their effects, but she didn't recall feeling sick in the so-called Warning Woods near DC. She thought, there's something different about this fissure. This illness and the way it reopened, it's like it's stronger than the rest or something. They pushed onward a few more yards. They were almost to where Crystal could hear a consistent hum from the fissure when Labrie gave up. "I'm sorry, Crystal, genuinely. I'm embarrassed. Maybe there's another day I could swing out here to meet you and..." He trailed off, noticing her looking at something over his shoulder. He turned and saw a trail camera mounted to a tree. He started to say, "That's fine, Crystal, this is public land, so..." "No," Crystal replied. "There's something else I can show you." Labrie said, "Okay, good. Does that mean we can get out of here?" Crystal nodded. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. I just downloaded the app and it's so simple to use that it has me excited to learn more about football for this upcoming season. I have a friend who's really into football and I need to ask him some questions like, does he think Josh Allen can score more or less than 270 pass yards, or can Joe Burrow score more or less than 2.5 passing touchdowns? I'm excited to learn more because of Prize Picks. Prize Picks is simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks is also the best way to get action on sports in more than 40 plus states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the app today and use code WARNINGWOODS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code WARNINGWOODS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Back at their vehicles, Labrie reported feeling much better. "Might have been some type of allergy to one of those plants," he said. He talked more about allergies while Crystal searched for Drew Harrison's YouTube channel, which she couldn't believe she'd forgotten to ask the name of. It turned out to be Proudiana. Okay, not the greatest for a paranormal exploration channel, she thought. But Drew seemed to have garnered a fairly large audience. Only 17,000 or so people subscribed to his channel, but he'd posted multiple videos that broke 100,000 views anyway. Crystal tapped one of these titled, "Disturbing Real Footage, Walking Rabbit Cryptid Exposed." "Here," she said, turning her phone for Labrie. "I'm not sure exactly what we're watching for here, but it has the most views. This is from a trail camera back there. They belong to..." She remembered Drew's feelings about police involvement and decided to say, "Someone I met." The video began in green night vision with the camera trained through the trees. It appeared to be a different camera than the one they'd found, closer to the fissure than that one. Probably due to the night vision, the fissure was all but invisible. It looked like a light fog not too far in the distance. Flecks representing gnats flying close to the camera provided the only proof this wasn't just a still image. Then, in a way Crystal truly could not describe better than out of nowhere, a rabbit appeared. Besides having fur that appeared slightly shaggier than a typical rabbit's, it looked like a typical rabbit. It was standing on its hind legs when it appeared, looking alert. Its head turned to the side as if sensing something off camera. But the longer the rabbit stood in this still pose, and the longer Crystal studied it, the more convinced she became its head was not turned towards some noise or scent it had detected, but rather so that its glinting black eye could stare into the camera. She could almost feel its eye contact through the space and time between her and the video. She understood why it had so many views. It was horrifically captivating. The rabbit took a step in the camera's direction. Not a hop, not a leap or a bound, but a step, with one foot. Then another with its other hind foot. It walked in this manner, maintaining its gaze at the camera. Without any sort of warning, the rabbit suddenly dropped to all fours, turning its body to match the direction of its head, and hopped away, its long fur bouncing as it moved out of frame. The video ended, and YouTube recommended 2 others from the channel. "I've seen enough," Labrie muttered. Crystal found his tone immediately discouraging. "So, you believe me now?" she asked, hopefully. "No," Labrie replied. "No, I can't believe you. I can't believe you'd go this far to trick me into believing you. Makes it hard to believe any of the crap you've spread around this town, Jennings. Yeah, I'm actually in shock. Why'd I let you lead me into the woods, you crazy? This is real, Mike. It's real. Look where I am right now. Look at my life. Tell me, how is any of this benefiting me, huh? Did I go to the news? No. I've gone to you. So you can't say it's for attention either. I'm not even talking to journalists off the record this time. Go home, Crystal. Go home and figure out what you're going to do with yourself." With that, Labrie got in his cruiser and left, leaving Crystal standing at the trailhead alone, angry and scared. Crystal spent the next week productively secluded in her house, cleaning, organizing, decluttering. Some of the work she found meditative, some draining, but it all kept her hands busy while her mind worked on the problem of what to do to help her hometown. The answer came from outside her mind, though. It came in the form of a text message from an unknown number. "Hey, this is Drew Harrison from Uber. Rose gave me your number so I could send this. Watch the video at 6:27. We gotta reach out. Could be huge." He'd sent her a link to a YouTube video. She could only see part of the title. Paranormal investigators react to. The thumbnail showed 2 young men making wide-eyed expressions. Shrugging, she tapped on it. One of the young men said, "What's up, everybody?" before Crystal scrubbed ahead to the timestamp Drew suggested. "Okay," the other man said. "Our third clip comes from a place called... You ever heard of Proudie, Indiana?" "Nope," said the first man. The other continued. "Well, that's where our next video is from. Let's take a look." In the lower right corner, the same video Crystal showed Labrie played while the 2 young men, brothers by the looks of them, reacted in real time. Both appeared far more serious at the end than when the video began. "You sure this one isn't fake?" one asked the other. The other replied, "I ran all of these through AI detectors. Could be CGI, I guess, but it looks pretty real, right? And I looked at this channel, Proudiana, and this person doesn't upload like a crazy amount. Like a realistic amount, I guess." The first one said, "Yeah, and I'm getting a weird feeling from this one." "Hey," he turned to look at the camera. "If you know who made this or if you made it, hit us up. I'd love to know more about where you caught this clip." Another text appeared before Crystal could reply. OMG, I messaged them an hour ago and they already replied. They might actually be able to help. Should we bring them in? Before replying, Crystal tapped on the video again. This time, she let it play. She wanted to know who these guys were and why Drew had so much faith in them. What's up, everybody? The video began again. Welcome back to our new reaction channel. Just in case you don't know, we're just a couple guys who do real paranormal investigations with the goal of showing people the best way to deal with things they couldn't otherwise understand. I'm Reese. And I'm Darian, the other man replied. Reese finished, and together we are the Whitney brothers. Stay tuned for part 3. You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For early, ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes I call Into the Woods, become a patron at patreon.com/thewarningwoods. You can also support the show by purchasing merch. The merch store and Patreon links are in this episode's description. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Warning Woods. And when you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into The Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.